Hello everybody, welcome back to the Mana Vault, and welcome to the first ever episode of Cracked and Constructed, where I'm going to go ahead and open up a box of pre-release from Modern Horizons 2, and then I'm going to work on constructing this deck. I'll kind of go through the cards that we open. We're going to go ahead and throw a list of all these cards in the description down below. Feel free to check that out. Try to build the best deck you can out of these cards. Maybe you can build something better than I did, but we'll go ahead and just jump right into this here. So we do get a promo, and in this case it is Sanctifier Invec. So that's our foil promo here. Behind that is a pack of tokens, so you do get some tokens to go along with your promo in this set. We'll go ahead and open up these packs and see what we're working with. Normally when I go through and do a pre-release kit, I like to sort by color. So we've got our white, blue, and red, and green, and black. So white, blue, black, red, green. Like to go in the color order. Obviously, not required. Got my lands. And multicolor gold cards. Colorless cards. And then normally I like to keep my rares in a separate pile. That way I can see where my bombs might be at the very end without having to worry about it. If I don't have any rares of a color, I tend not to play it as often, but it's not guaranteed. Nice little removal. There are a lot of dual lands in this set, so you can probably get away with 3 colors very easily, I imagine. We get a nice little mythic here with Svielun or Sivielun. I don't know. Sea of Sea and Sky, something like that. So we get a nice little merfolk there. Probably not great in sealed because you do need some merfolk, but it's not awful. It's a 3-mana 3/4 that when it attacks you get to draw a card. So at the very least, it's above rate and it draws you a card when it attacks. So it's still probably pretty good. A little late to dinner action, more bone shards, storm cards, break in the ice, destroy all those Tron lands. That'll make resident player here very happy. JC loves his Tron lands being destroyed. Get a nice little upheaval there. Another rare and Profane Tutor, a red card, and a nice little token. Abundant Harvest, Ornithopter to help fix even more, Scuttletide, Fey Offering, Seal of Cleansing, Timeless Dragon, decent card, especially unlimited. Little 5-mana 5/5 that also helps you cycle into, or mana fix into your white. Because if you don't have lands early on, you can pay 2 mana to discard it and draw planes. The old Monoskellion, not to be confused with Triskelion. That looks really nice. We got a Turok Dread Cantor. We have the full art of it this time. Looks really nice there. And then with 1 pack to go, see what else we have in this kit. If I can figure out how to open it. Maybe not. Yeah, there's one merfolk to go with our merfolk god. We got the Scourge Familiar, and we got Dam. Also known as kind of Damnation Wrath of God, but sometimes less restrictive mana cost though. So I always like to just kind of take a look at my rares to start off with, see what it is I'm dealing with. Well, pretty much everything's either black or blue here. Including this land. It's colorless, but if I have any wizards that I might want to return, maybe get some enter the battlefield effects again, or if to save it from removal, I can always use this. It's a blue effect, so Probably won't end up playing this Timeless Dragon, but you never know. I do have 3 blue cards, 3 black cards as my rares. So that's generally the direction I want to head when I see a very skewed pool of rares like that. I also have 2 blue-black lands to go with that, so that kind of helps. If I do want to splash anything, I have some lands to help me out with that possibly. I have some blue and red or blue and green lands. So first thing I'm going to do is just take a look at this black. It does also look to be the largest pile that I opened. Just to kind of go through these. Sinister Starfish is actually pretty decent. 2 mana 0/3, but you get to surveil 1 just by simply tapping it. Pretty nice little effect. The Scourge Familiar, it's interesting. It's 5 mana 3/2 flyer that allows you to make mana, but the problem is at 5 mana you don't necessarily want to be discarding cards just to make some mana, so it might not be the best. The Discerning Taste, decent little card draw spell. Tragic Fall is a good one to use. Nice little 2 mana removal spell unlimited. You always want to have like not as many removal spells as possible, but you can probably play upwards of 10 removal spells and be fine if the rest of your deck is creatures. So Tragic Fall, 2 mana -3/-3. If you don't have any cards in your hand though, you get to give a creature -13/-13, so that's pretty good. The Charger's okay, 3 mana 3/2, nothing wrong with that. But when it escapes, you can turn it into a flyer or a 4/2. So that's actually kind of good, especially with these Discerning Tastes, because the rest go into your graveyard. So you do get to draw a card, but then you could put these Chargers into your graveyard and just kind of create some sort of fuel for them. So the Charger definitely goes up in value if you are playing the Discerning Taste in your deck. Nested Shambler's okay. 1 mana 1/1 that when it dies, you're probably only going to get a 1/1 in return, but you could possibly get more than that. Archfiend of Sorrows I kind of like a lot, especially if we are playing those Discerning Tastes, because it has the Unearth ability. So pretty cool card. It's a 7 mana 4/5 flyer that when it enters, your opponent's creatures get -2/-2, so it's a mass board shrink / wipe depending on how big their board is. It'll allow you to get in for a big attack. And the nice thing is it does have Unearth, so for 5 mana from your graveyard, you can bring it back. It goes away at the end of your turn, but if we're putting it in the graveyard, 5 mana for that effect's pretty good. Another one of those. Break the Ice, probably not going to be very good in Limited, as there are very few lands that only produce, or that do produce colorless, so probably not going to be wanting to play Break the Ice. Bone Shards, pretty good card, 1 mana. Destroy a creature or planeswalker. You do have to sacrifice a creature or discard a card, but it's worth it for only 1 mana to do that. Echoing Return, if we had a lot of cards with the same name, I could see maybe playing this card. For only 1 mana to return a card, and all other cards with the same name, actually pretty decent, especially if we are playing multiples. Bone Shards, again, pretty good. Another Tragic Fall, definitely want to play that. Chattering Augur, it's okay. 2 mana 1/1 that can't block. But it does let you draw a card. So actually this card's pretty decent, especially because it has the 4 mana. Return it from your graveyard to your hand, especially if we're playing those other cards that put cards into our graveyard. So we can kind of abuse the fact that we didn't draw it off of that card, but we're kind of putting it in the graveyard for later use. Another Echoing Return. I probably wouldn't consider playing 2 of these cards. We really only need 1. So we do have a good black pool there. Again, I saw that we had all black and blue rares, so that's kind of where my mindset is right now. Tide Shaper is an interesting one. A lot of the time, 1-drops and Limited aren't necessarily where you want to be, but this card does have some upside. It's a Merfolk. I don't know if we're going to have enough Merfolk for it to be worth it to just basically be playing it for that reason. Something that's kind of interesting that we can do with this Tide Shaper, because we have the Riptide Laboratory. If this game starts to get if the game starts to get long, we could actually return it to our hand with the Riptide Laboratory, turn our opponent's lands into islands. That way, they're not going to be able to produce whatever colors of mana their deck's supposed to be making, and actually turn off all of their lands and just turn them into islands. That's a really long, grindy strategy, but it is something that we could potentially do. If we find ourselves with a lot of artifacts, Affinity has always been a pretty broken mechanic. So this would allow us to cast this for potentially 1 mana if we had a lot of artifacts. And whenever an artifact enters, you get to untap it. So if I did have a heavy artifact theme, I would consider playing that Steelfin Whale. Mental Journeys, pretty good card. This is probably a slam dunk card in most limited decks. It's 6 mana at instant speed to draw 3 cards, which isn't that great of an effect. But when you combine that with the fact that it has basic land cycling for 1 and a blue, it actually is really good because we can go ahead and try to find those other lands that we need. So maybe we don't have a swamp, or maybe we don't have our 3rd or 4th land. We can go ahead and just ditch this early on, go get the land that we need, and make sure that we hit all of our land drops. Scuttletide here, kind of an interesting card. It's 2 mana to discard a card, or it's 2 mana for an enchantment that we pay 1 to discard a card to make a 0/3 crab. But it also has Delirium, which gives crabs +1/+1 if you achieve Delirium, which is 4 or more card types in your graveyard. So it itself is an engine to allow you to discard various card types in order to enable Delirium. On top of that, we have some black graveyard synergy cards, where if we put it in the graveyard, we might be able to return it later on, which we saw with a card like Clattering Augur here. So this card allows us to return it from our graveyard to our hand. So we can actually just keep on discarding it to the Scuttletide and then return it back to our hand and continue to make crabs that, if we have Delirium turned on, will actually be 1/4s, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're able to do it 1 or 2 times per turn, it actually gets to be pretty good in the late game if you need to be in a grindy matchup. Foul Watcher. Let's see. We got 2 mana flyer. Enters the battlefield, you get to surveil 1. Again, if we're trying to go for Delirium, it might be okay. It's a 2 mana 2/2 flyer for 2. I don't know. Other than that, it's kind of filler. Maybe we'll play it, maybe not. Lucid Dreams, 5 mana to draw cards based on the number of card types in your graveyard. So it's kind of like Goyf, but for card draw. If we find ourselves playing a lot of card types and we are filling up that graveyard, this is definitely a consideration. I'd probably play it as long as we could pretty consistently say that we're going to have at least 4 card types in our graveyard. Anything less than that, then it's probably not worth the cut at sorcery speed. We got Step Through, which allows us to return 2 cards to their hand, but it also has wizard cycling of 2. So if we do find ourselves with various wizards that we definitely want to play, especially combined with that Riptide Laboratory that we opened up, the rare land, maybe we can actually try to make wizards a thing here. I'd have to kind of double check, make sure the wizard counts enough to be there. We'll have to check on that. Lose Focus, nice little counter spell. It's kind of like Mana Leak, but it can replicate. So the replicate allows you to basically pay an extra blue. For every extra blue you pay, they have to pay an extra 2. So it's kind of like Mana Leak on the baseline, and then it gets a little bit better. We got Said and Done. Returns an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand, or we can tap down 2 creatures they don't untap. Decent little card there. 3 mana 3/1 here, that when it enters we get a treasure. We can also sacrifice a treasure to give it flying till the end of turn. It's an okay little card there, nothing amazing. We got the Ravaging Visionary here, 2 mana 1/1. Doesn't sound very good, but for a single blue we can draw a card and discard a card. And then if we eventually get our Delirium online again, it looks like we're able to maybe sift through our deck pretty well with what we've opened so far. We might actually be able to build some sort of blue-black Delirium deck here, and this strategy might work out for us. With that ability, we can actually pay 3 mana to just straight up draw a card. We don't have to worry about discarding a card afterwards, so we don't have to loot, we can just draw a card. And then another Whale. Just to kind of look at more, see if we got any blue-black cards here. Looks like we did get 1. Just check out what that one might be here. Draw 2 cards, discard a card. We gain life equal to the number of cards I've discarded this turn. And then it has Jumpstart. So, not a bad card. Baseline, 3 mana, instant speed, draw 2, discard 1, gain 1. If we do it again, or if we're combining it with other effects, we might gain extra life. But for 3 mana, instant speed to draw 2 cards is actually pretty good. Even though we have to discard 1, that's actually kind of in our benefit, it seems, for this deck. Then just double check any uncommons, see if we have anything that might work well in our deck here. This Milliken might be pretty good. And then I'm actually a big fan of these this Vectus gloves. So the reason I like these in this format is you tend to open a lot of artifact lands, so your opponents are most likely going to have some sort of artifact land, and this particular equipment gives artifact land walk, meaning your creature's unblockable if they do have an artifact land. On top of that, it also gives your creature +2 power. So even if they don't have one, it allows your small creatures to kind of trade up, but it'll help get through a lot of the time because most people tend to be playing those artifacts in this format. To kind of go along with our strategy here, we have Milliken, little 2 mana, 0/1, taps to mill a card, and it also adds a colorless mana when we do that. So it's a ramp creature that's an artifact to help for our Delirium, and it also helps enable our Delirium because it mills a card whenever we use it for mana. So I'm thinking it's going to be blue-black. It might not be. I'm going to actually take the rest of this off camera. I'll go ahead and build a deck. I'll bring it back here in a second. For you guys, it'll be instant, and we'll see what we came up with, and then you can let us know in the comments what kind of deck you came up with. And we're back. So this is the deck that we've constructed here. We'll go ahead and post the deck list for just this specific deck as well, so you'll be able to take a look at that based on the pool of cards that you can see in the description below as well. So go ahead and check out this deck there if you want, but I'll go ahead and just recap it real quick here on camera. So I'm playing a few extra artifacts because I have some synergies with artifacts. I also want to try to enable Delirium, so it's a lot easier when I play them. So Sanctuary Raptor, decent card, 3 mana, 2/1 flyer. But if I control 3 or more tokens whenever it attacks, it gets +2/+0 on first strike. So this could be a 4/1 first striking flyer for 3 mana. I have that crab card, which we'll see later that this works well with. Monoskellion. It's basically just a 2 mana 2/2 that allows me to deal 1 damage to something if I need to at any point for just the low cost of 1 mana. Again, it'll just turn into a 1/1 at that point, but a solid little artifact. To kind of help me play less lands and still have artifacts, I have Ornithopter of Paradise, 2 mana 0/2, adds 1 mana of any color. I have the Milliken, which also allows me to ramp a little bit. 2 mana 0/1, but I get to mill a card whenever I tap it for 1 mana. The Vectis Gloves is a nice little equipment, more artifacts. Gives me artifact land walk, which I think will be important. So I added in a few extra artifacts. I have Dahada's Ploy here, 3 mana, draw 2 cards, discard a card. Really good, allowing me to enable Delirium. It's also a good card draw for just 3 mana. Then I can do it again from my graveyard. Sinister Starfish, just a nice little 2 mana 0/3 on the ground, but it gives me the added benefit of being able to just tap it to surveil 1. I've got Tragic Fall here. I've got a couple of these. 2 mana, -3/-3 is decent on its own. And if I have the added benefit of being Hellbent, it's pretty much 2 mana to kill any creature in the format. I've got the Charger. Well, not great on its own as a 3 mana 3/2. I do have the ability to play it from the graveyard by exiling some other cards, paying a little bit more mana. So if I do get my graveyard full, I can cast this later on. To help me fill up the graveyard, I am playing 1 Discerning Taste here. Allows me to mill 3 cards into my graveyard, put 1 of them into my hand, and gain a little bit of life in the process, possibly. Archfiend of Sorrows. 7 mana is a little bit steep, but for 5 mana I can play it from the graveyard. Again, it will go away at the end of the turn if I do play it from the graveyard, but pretty good versatility. Late game, this is going to be a pretty big bomb here, I imagine. A little bit more removal with Bone Shards, 1 mana to destroy a creature. I just have to sacrifice a creature or discard a card. And one of the perfect creatures to be sacrificing or discarding is actually this next card here, the Clattering Augur. I talked about that earlier. We have Dam, nice little removal spell. Can't really overload it in this deck. I don't have the ability to make the white mana needed, but we do have 2 mana to destroy a creature. We also have the Turok Dread Cantor. Not a bad card. 2 mana, 2/1. Protection from white. Also, we have the added ability of Kicker, which gives us Hymn to Turok on this card for an additional 2 mana. Our opponent will have to discard 2 cards at random, and then, assuming they have at least 2 cards in hand, this will be a 4 mana 4/3 with protection from red, or from white. I decided to play the Upheaval because in Limited, Upheaval's pretty good. If it's late game, we can go ahead and take advantage of all of our extra mana and replay a lot of our guys, while our opponent will be stuck to just playing their 1 land and probably passing the turn. We have our Merfolk God here. It's 3 mana 3/4. that whenever it attacks, I draw a card. I do have two other merfolk in the deck, so this could theoretically get indestructible. I'm not counting on that, though, in this deck, but it is a possibility. So one of the reasons that I'm playing some of these extra artifacts is because I have the Thought Monitor here. It's not amazing without artifacts, considering it's a 7-mana 2/2, but it does have the affinity for artifacts, so every artifact I have, it'll cost 1 less generic mana to cast, and when it enters, I get to draw 2 cards. I also have the Follow Watcher here. In my deck, I imagine a lot of the time this is going to be a 2-mana 2/2 flyer, which allows me to surveil 1 when it enters the battlefield. Even if it's not a 2/2 right away, later in the game it will be a 2/2, I imagine. I've got the Scuttle Tide. Nice little enchantment here. It helps me to enable the Delirium in itself, and then it also allows me to kind of discard my cards to accrue value, make 0/3s, which, assuming I have Delirium, are actually 1/4s. I've got that Mental Journey, 6 mana, draw 3 cards, but more importantly, it also has the basic land cycling. So early on, I can use this to go ahead and find my land. Late in the game, I can draw some cards. I've got a couple merfolk here with Raving Visionary. Very good, iconic merfolk looter, basically, but upgraded so that when I have Delirium, I can just draw a card. And then I've got the Tide Shaper, which 1 mana, 1/1. But if an opponent has an island, it's a 2/2, and I can kick it for 1 mana to make their land into an island, which goes well with the Riptide Laboratory. This card, you definitely don't necessarily need to play it in this deck. I do only have 2 wizards, so I can't really be doing a lot of stuff with the Riptide Laboratory, but it allows me to save either my Tide Shaper or my Ravaging Visionary. And then I have a couple of artifact lands here just to help with fixing. They're also artifacts, which will lower my affinity for artifacts. And then basically 7 swamps, 6 islands to round out the deck. So that's the deck that I've made here on Cracked and Constructed. Let me know down in the comments what kind of decks you might have made from this pool. And we'll see you next time on the Mana Vault.